a child psychologist. Just thought I'd throw that out. So I am not an expert necessarily in addiction and codependency, but I was trained in psychology and got my PhD at the University of Arkansas a while back. But I was trained in the process of addiction, the research of addiction and codependency, and I had to kind of brush up on some dusty books and buy some new books, but I was up for the challenge when Burl mentioned it. And actually, it's been a fascinating process because I've realized the codependent tendencies within myself. So that's been really fascinating, and I've learned so much. And I think, any of us put in the right situation or the wrong situation, these pieces of us come out and they become distorted and they become unhealthy and they take a hold. But I think all people have the potential and the vulnerability to be drawn into these things. So it's been a very educational process for me in doing this. And despite the fact that I specialize in children, I see a few adults and I see many parents who are stuck, who are fighting for their children, for the good of their children in some unhealthy ways. So those are some process that I began to see and just getting into this research and this literature. I hope this is helpful for you. We're going to have a time to ask questions at the end. But I want to start with what is codependency, because I think people throw that word around a lot, and I've thrown it around here and there probably, but I'm not sure that we all agree on what it means. And honestly, the people that study addiction every day, some of them disagree a little bit. So I've looked through a lot of information. I'm going to give you some of the definitions that I like the best. First of all, this term came up back in the 1970s when they really began intervening with addiction, the 12-step programs, and they began to see, okay, it's not just the person that's struggling, it's all the people around them. They're having trouble too. Maybe we should do something on their behalf. And so Al-Anon was born, and those are some historical parts of codependency. You can go to that next slide. It kind of talks about that, but those letters are pretty small. Sorry about that. They're smaller than I expected up there. But basically, we learned, first of all, that we can help people with addictions. Then we learned there were other people involved that got kind of strung along in the addiction. And then we learned that addiction wasn't just alcohol, that it could involve any behavior that could become compulsive. So things that you wouldn't imagine can be an addiction can be an addiction. So we have to really broaden our idea of that term, of what it can encompass. So defining codependency, a good way to think about it is a relationship addiction. That you're addicted to that relationship, you're attached to that relationship in an unhealthy way to the point that it begins to damage who you are and damage the other person involved. And a codependent person is someone who has let another person's behavior affect him or her, and they're obsessed with controlling that person. A good way to think about it, and I put something out on the group Facebook page, I really wanted a marionette puppet for tonight, even though I have no idea how to work one of those. I wanted to try, and no one responded, so I guess people don't keep those around. But if you think about a marionette puppet, someone who is codependent is the puppet. And the person to which they are unhealthily attached is the wood. So when you lift up one side, when this person does this thing, they do this thing. So they're caught in this emotional roller coaster. And the person in the position of codependency is just begging that other person to get off the roller coaster. But they got to hang on with them to make sure they're okay. So it's up and down, and they're holding on for dear life, just praying that other person would let go. And what they don't realize, and what, in my life I can see at times I haven't realized, is that I can let go. But I thought I needed to hang on. I thought I needed to stay on that ride with them. So it's almost like connected as if a marionette, just stuck in that situation. A relationship defined by one person who is psychologically dependent in an unhealthy way to someone who is addicted to a drug or any form of self-destructive behavior. It's watching someone destroy themselves in some way and doing everything you can to fix it. What's the problem? You can't fix it. You can't fix it. Okay, let's look at that next slide there. This one, codependency is not planful. We don't wake up one day and decide, that sounds interesting. I want to check that out. I think I want to be in a codependent relationship. That sounds really passionate and exciting. Let's go for that. That is not a proactive, planful process. Codependency develops in reaction to something else, something overwhelming, something out of control. And so we learn to either underreact. Underreact means just minimize it. We're going to go through these a little more in detail in a little bit. But you just sort of take your emotions and you cram them down as tight and as hard as you can. You push them down in there and you don't react. You could just be gripping the sides of your chair, but you just act like it's no big deal. They just walked in and cussed you a blue streak, but you just sit there and you grip the chair and you act as if it didn't occur. Okay, that would be an underreaction. Overreaction. For example, your child is sent to the principal's office and they've had a history at the school. And you're almost in a panic attack before you get there because you are so scared that you're going right back down that road again, that you've sacrificed everything to get your child out of. That's an overreaction. But the problem is it's always in reaction to that other person. So underreact, overreact, you rarely choose to act. I think when you're living in codependency, you forget that you have choices. You forget that you can independently choose how you respond to a situation. And the reason you forget that is that your heart is tied up into it so heavily that you become desperate to fix it in one way or another. Codependency is progressive. It starts out kind of small, and we're going to talk more in depth about how it starts out. But once it starts out, it's like an illness, and it starts to characterize every part of the relationship. It characterizes your thoughts, your time, your spare time, your energy, your money. You get wrapped up into it. Think about that speed on that roller coaster, getting faster and faster, and you're just trying to hang on. So codependency is a very important topic. Let's talk about on the next slide, what does it look like? You may have heard these terms before. There's lots of quizzes you can take. Some of the books that I had, you can take a quiz to see how much codependency you have in your life. First of all is caretaking. The biggest thing that stands out to me on this one is that you are afraid of someone else feeling something painful. So you got to jump in. You got to take care of them. You don't want them to feel that pain and disappointment. That you don't want that consequence to come their way. You want to take care of them. And so you jump in and you rescue them. You caretake. You think about ways you can protect that person. You want to just bear the blow for them. Whatever you have to do, you're doing it for their own good because you know they can't take care of themselves. What's the problem? You can't protect them from those actions. And one of the biggest things that I think is God may be trying to wake them up with some of those costs and those consequences that you're laying yourself out for, trying to buffer them from. So sometimes I think we often get in God's way because we want to take care of it. Pain is a part of life. Pain is a part of our decisions. But it's part of the reason we take such good care of them is because if they're in pain, remember that heart is wrapped up in them. You're going to experience pain. So it makes that compulsion to jump in and to take care of them so much stronger because you don't want to hurt either. You're tired of hurting. So that's part of the cycle. Low self-worth. I think one of the things at the heart of codependency is that why won't they fix it for me? They know how much I love them. They know how much I have tried and prayed and cried and given and done everything I can do, and yet here we are again. They're right back in that cycle. And I guess I'm just not worth it. I guess it's just not, I'm not enough for them. People with low self-worth have a hard time with compliments. When I see kids in my office that struggle with depression, and their parents tell me, and one of the assignments I give them is you go home and you make a list of great things about them, and you hide it in a secret place and you tell them where it is. And you add to it every day. You put something else on there. And then once a week, you read it to them. Some parents will come back and say, my kid can't stand it. They don't want me to read them the items on that list. So I guess we're not going to do it. And I say, yeah, you're going to do it. I told you were going to do it. No, I'm not trying to control them, but I say, yes, it is so important. It's even more important now that I know how bad things are. They can't even hear those good things. But being stuck in a codependent relationship just beats down your self-worth. Cycle after relapse, after problem, after stress, because you're realizing every day, I'm not fixing it. I'm failing. I'm not enough. So it's tough on your self-worth. Repression. People involved in codependency forget what they like. They forget what their favorite color is, what their favorite movies are, what makes them unique and different, how they like to have fun. Because it all gets wrapped up and all their energy gets poured into taking charge of that other person and trying to protect them. So there's a repression of who you are, of who God designed you to be. Obsessive behavior, maybe you check the phone records on the internet 400 times a day to watch that person. I'm just checking every text message. I'm seeing who they sent it to. I'm seeing what time. Or you check the bank statements every 30 minutes. There's obsessive behavior that can come into this. Sometimes it's just worry. It's just repeating it over and over in your mind of worst case scenarios. Well, what if this happened? Or what if that happened? And so you just get caught in that cycle. Remember the roller coaster. You're riding that roller coaster with them. Controlling. This is a big one, I think, for me. I think I could be a great controller of people because, sometimes you just think, I know how to do it better. Like, if they would just do it my way, life would be great. I want to control my kids. And when they are kids and they make those same mistakes that, it says it takes 17 times to teach them or something, your frustration gets pretty high. I just want to control people sometimes. Sometimes I want to control my husband, and he really doesn't like that. But in a codependent situation, you not only have that desire, you're desperate to control that person. You are desperate because your well-being depends on their choices. Remember, you're connected. You're riding that roller coaster with them. So you'll do anything to control them, manipulate, whatever. Even if it has to get, some unhealthy methods to try to control them. Denial, just complete denial. And this is something that I have witnessed before, of just coming up with a beautiful, sugar-coated way to say something, and it's amazing how far that can go. I had a patient tell me one time, well, everyone has their drug of choice, and mine is denial. And I choose that. Well, it's hard to work with that. I choose to stay in denial because it's easier, so back off, was basically what that person was saying to me. Denial feels good for a little bit, but we always know that we're denying something painful. Dependency. This form of dependency with codependency is an emotional dependency. Remember, you don't feel good about who you are. You're completely wrapped up in caretaking, protecting, trying to control this person who's spinning out of control, and yet your whole value, your whole psychological well-being is dependent on them. Remember the marionette? You're not in control. You're being controlled. And that is what is happening. So all your efforts to control them, and yet you're the one dependent on them. Remember, it's a relationship addiction. Poor communication. You know, I think some of the communication of codependency is incredibly dark. It's nothing we'd want broadcast. You know, guilting, shaming, begging, pleading, manipulating, whatever we have to do. How dare you do that to me again? Who do you think you are? Please, I am begging you to stop it. I can't take this anymore. If you love me, you would stop. All of those are things that could be said in a codependent situation. Weak boundaries. You know, boundaries. There's a really good book, Boundaries, by Henry Cloud and Townsend. I have a copy of it if anybody wants to take a look at it after. But that is something so essential to protecting yourself as an individual, to remembering that you can say no, that you can draw a line in the sand, and that's okay. That doesn't make you a bad person because you're not available 24 hours a day and just unconditionally supportive of someone. That is not healthy. It is okay to set boundaries. Those are some characteristics of codependency. There's a couple more. Lack of trust. Well, that's really understandable. But I think for me, the lack of trust with codependency is more with the Lord, because it's an issue of, I've got to fix this. I can't let this go. And when we grab onto it so tight, we're saying, God, I know you're there, but I got this one. It's really important for me to be in charge here. I know you're powerful, but, you know, I can't let my grip any looser than it is right now. Anger. How could you not be angry if you have sacrificed yourself? You're riding this roller coaster with this person caught in this pattern, and they won't stop. It is just incredibly frustrating, right? It just makes you want to throw a fit and stomp your feet and scream because they're not doing what you need them to do. You've done everything right. You've done everything you could do to fix the situation. You bailed them out. You lied to their boss for them. You've done everything you can imagine, and you turn around and here we go again. The problem is you can't fix it. All right, let's look at that next slide there. Examples of codependency. You can be in a codependent relationship with a parent, a significant other, a spouse, a family member, or a friend. I have a friend that has leaned on me for years in a very abusive marriage. And I mean, for months, I'll get a phone call at 6 a.m. every morning. Okay, this is what happened last night. Okay, and I'm just like sick about it because I tell her what she needed. I mean, I would tell her, this is what you need to do. You know, to me, it was like, okay, here's the plan. I mean, I have people praying, and we're all like, okay, here's your plan. What does she do? She stays in the same cycle. Now I haven't heard from her in probably 8 months, and that's because she doesn't want to talk about it, because things are okay right now. When the abuse comes on strong again, I'll start getting calls, but I've decided I'm going to set a boundary. And my boundary is, I can pray for you, I can love you, but I can't listen every day to the same story. I love you so much, it's very painful for me, and I have to distance myself. And I will get you any help that you need. I'll help you find phone numbers, but I can't be that person. And that's a boundary I'm going to have to set. I want to read you 3 little short paragraphs, 3 different stories of codependency. And I hope you don't mind being read to because I couldn't memorize these. But, oh my. Okay. Whew. Someone's obviously offended that I'm reading. Okay. Bear with me. I'll add some, excitement in the story so you'll be interested like I do with my kids. Okay. Let's see. All right. This is Randall's story. And these are 3 very different stories of codependency. Okay, clients who seek help from mental health and chemical dependency agencies are not the only people who suffer from codependency. Randall was a chemical dependency counselor and a recovering alcoholic with several years of sobriety when he found himself having troubles. Randall was also an adult child of an alcoholic. Adult children of alcoholics often struggle with codependency because that was their pattern they learned in their formative years. Okay. His father and 3 brothers were alcoholics. An intelligent, sensitive man who enjoyed his work, Randall's problem was his leisure time. He spent most of it worrying about, obsessed with, other people and their problems. Sometimes he tried to untangle messes alcoholics created. Other times he felt angry with the alcoholics for creating the messes he felt obligated to clean up. Sometimes he felt upset because people, not necessarily alcoholics, behaved in particular ways. He ranted, felt guilty, sorry, and used by people. Rarely, however, did he feel close to them. Rarely did he have fun. For many years, Randall believed his duty was to worry about people and get involved in their problems. He called his behavior kindness, concern, love, and sometimes righteous indignation. Now, after getting help for his problem, he calls it codependency. So that's example 1. So he saw it almost as an extension of his professional duty, but it took over his mind and his life. This is for the women. This is a female example. This is Marlis, and I think all of us can relate to this on some level. Sometimes codependent behavior becomes entangled with being a good wife, mother, brother, or Christian. Now in her 40s, Marlis is an attractive woman when she takes care of herself. Most of the time, however, she's busy taking care of her 5 children and her husband, who is a recovering alcoholic. She devoted her life to making them happy, but she didn't succeed. Usually she feels angry, unappreciated for her efforts, and her family feels angry at her. She spends too much of the family's budget on toys and clothing for the children, whatever they want. She chauffeurs, reads to, cooks for, cleans for, cuddles and coddles those around her, but nobody gives to her. Most of the time they don't even say thank you. Marlis resents her constant giving to people in her life. She resents how her family and their needs control her life. She chose nursing as her profession, and she often resents that. But I feel guilty when I don't do what's asked of me. I feel guilty when I don't live up to my standards for a wife and a mother. I feel guilty when I don't live up to other people's standards for me. I just plain feel guilty, she said. In fact, I schedule my day, my priorities, according to guilt. Does endlessly taking care of people, resenting it, and expecting nothing in return mean Marlis is a good wife and mother, or could it mean that she is codependent? Last example is Alyssa's story, and this is a story of a parent. Alcoholism or chemical dependency is not the only family problem that can create a codependent person. Alyssa, the mother of 2 teenagers, worked part-time at a mental health organization when she went to a family counselor. She went to counseling because her oldest child, a 14-year-old boy, was constantly causing problems. He ran away, broke curfew, skipped school, disobeyed other family rules, and generally did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. This child, Alyssa told the counselor, is driving me crazy. She meant it. She was worried sick. Some days she was so depressed and troubled she couldn't get out of bed. Alyssa had tried everything she could think of to help this child. She'd placed him in treatment 3 times, put him in 2 different foster homes, and dragged the whole family from counselor to counselor. Alyssa had tried other techniques too. She had threatened, cried, hollered, and begged. She had gotten tough and called the police on him. She had tried gentleness and forgiveness. She even tried acting like he hadn't done the inappropriate things he had done. Denial. Let's just forget it all. She had locked him out, and she had traveled halfway across the state to bring him home after he ran away. Although her efforts hadn't helped her child, Alyssa was obsessed with finding and doing the one thing that would make him see the errors of his ways. The one thing, this time, I'm going to help him change. So that's an example of a parent caught up in that codependency. How scary is it to lock that door and to keep it closed and to allow that child to leave back out into the world while they're choosing to hurt themselves? That's hard. I work with a family right now, and I see the younger kid who's so tired of the older brother who's addicted to meth keep coming in the house and then leaving, and coming in the house and then leaving. And she's so depressed because she feels like she doesn't matter. You know, these things really affect families. They affect everyone involved. But as much as I feel for that girl, I feel for that